Hey folks, welcome to Moonshift Audio. This week I'm going to talk a bit about what I think are some red flags when it comes to hiring a mix engineer for your tracks. I've worked with quite a few different mixers over the years, and my experiences have been very mixed in terms of the communications, the quality of the work, and of course the pricing. I've also worked with a lot of clients as a mixer myself who have been burned in the past with other engineers, so I thought it'd be helpful to give you a few thoughts on things that I think you should look out for when you're thinking about working with a mixer for the first time. So, red flag number one, they don't specialize. Now, it might seem obvious. I have talked before about how it's good to get a specialist in your particular field who works with your genre and knows your kind of styles, but there are a lot of mix engineers out there who are just sort of advertising themselves as a jack of all trades. And for me, that would absolutely set alarm bells ringing. Let's say you're making EDM or house or pop music or something like that with like a really bright, crystal clear vocal, lots of lovely reverb, heavy electronic drums. Do you want someone who spends most of their time mixing sort of like death metal or jazz or reggae to be working on that? I don't know if you do. There's issues about plugins and equipment. You know, I focus mostly on pop music and electronic stuff, and the plugin selection that I've got and the hardware that I've chosen is definitely well suited to those sounds. Most of the kind of specialist or colored equipment I have is still fairly clean. It's kind of bright and punchy. Whereas I used to work on a bit of kind of like indie and punk music, and when I was doing that, the studio where I was working had much more colored kind of equipment. I used to use different styles of compression. Distortion was used in a very different way. It's a very different process. And although I do have that kind of experience, to be honest, if someone came to me tomorrow and said, I've got this punk track that I've recorded, can you mix it? I probably would turn it down. If someone came to me and said, I've got a metal track, I would definitely turn it down, because although plugins are very versatile and I know my way around a live drum kit, I just don't listen to metal music really, so I'm not going to be clued up on the style, what's currently fashionable, what sound is sort of in at the moment, and so I know that I'm not going to be able to do a good job for that client, and so I would not take the project. And if you're talking to someone who says they do a bit of everything or their portfolio is all over the place, I would definitely suggest that you might be better off trying to find someone who specializes in the kind of music that you're looking to get mixed. Red flag number two, and this might seem like a bit of a funny one, but I would say be a little bit wary of any mixer who displays their rates. Now, I actually get a little bit of flack for this. I get quite a few messages from people saying, what are your rates? How much for this? Why don't you display your rates? And the reason is because every project is really different. Like, in the simplest sense, let's say someone's just got a backing track that's finished and they just want a vocal mixed over that. That is a pretty small project and I would price that accordingly. You compare that to a full mix where you've got like 90 tracks of backing and then 60 tracks of vocal, very different animal, yeah? So I can't just say, right, a mix is 50 quid or a mix is 500 quid. It's got to be a sliding scale. And I have seen mixes say, you know, have a price bracketing system where it's like 0 to 5 tracks is this much, 5 to 10 tracks is this much, 20 to 50 tracks and so on. But for me, it goes deeper than that, because what about if those tracks need comping still? You know, comping a vocal, if they've done 10 takes, could take hours. Does the vocal need tuning as well? Do they want editing? Do they want time aligning on live instrument recordings? Are there live drums that need to be quantized? There are so many questions about a mix before you get started that are massively going to impact the amount of work and the amount of time it takes for me to do a good mix for you. So it's very difficult for me to give a client an accurate idea of price without talking to them and learning a little bit more about the project. I've seen other mixers in forums and stuff online saying, oh, like I took on this project and then the client sent me the files and they're a total mess. And I had to spend half a day editing and comping and tuning. I haven't charged for that and now I'm getting annoyed. And the sense that I get when you hear people talking like that is probably they're not actually going to be delivering a very good mix to the client, because they've used half their time that they allocated for that project getting the audio ready for the mix, or they're going to start resenting it and they're going to lose their love for the project. I don't know. For me, it's all about talking about the project before you start. All right, red flag number three is all about the revisions process. Now, a lot of mixers, most mixers will offer unlimited revisions. My angle is that I offer 3 sets of revisions as standard, and then we sort of should be hopefully honing in on the sound. And if we need a couple more rounds or even a few more rounds after that to kind of zero in, get things absolutely perfect so the client's completely happy with how it sounds, absolutely we'll do it. There's no upper limit on the number of revisions. Admittedly, it's very rare these days that I go beyond about 3 rounds of revisions. That's normally more than enough to satisfy the client. But to me, if you're putting a hard limit on the number of revisions that you're prepared to do for a client, then that tells me that you're prepared to let that client walk away with a mix that they're not completely happy with. If you do 2 rounds or 3 rounds or 5 rounds and then you say, oh, sorry, that's it, you've had your lot, you're going to have to pay me more if you want more revisions, then to me that says something about the attitude you have towards the project. It's more about the mixer saying, right, this is the limit of the time I'm prepared to give this, rather than saying, this is about the outcome of the project. This is about the final mix. I need the client to be happy. And it's basically prioritizing their time over the happiness of the client. Red flag number 4, they don't ask questions. Now, this is an interesting one. I remember the first time that I sent off a track to be mixed, the guy just said, okay, here's the price. I was like, great. And then he just said, right, send me the files, and he mixed it. To be fair, I think he did a half decent job. At that time, I wasn't very experienced. I didn't really know what I was going to be looking out for. But now that I'm doing this a lot, it seems wild to me that he didn't ask me anything at all about the track. He didn't ask me about the project. He didn't ask me how many people were working on it. He didn't ask me where I was. It was a single track. He didn't ask me whether it's for an album or to go on an EP. He didn't ask me about what I liked about it, what vision I had for it. In short, he didn't ask me any questions at all. And to me, I just can't imagine going into a project like that. When an artist comes to me with a track that's ready for mix, I know that they've put a lot of their time, energy, and heart into that. You know, your music is your art. And so for me to just go, oh yeah, I'll do that, without asking anything at all about their motivation, how they'd like it to sound, what the feeling is, what emotions came into the track, what the song means to them. All of those questions feed into getting a mix that actually really, really benefits the track and the artist. So if your mixer isn't asking questions, it might be worth thinking about why that could be. Red flag number 5, they don't ask for the rough mix. Now, to be honest, I think this is probably quite rare, if only because most of the time I find out what the track is that I'm mixing when someone sends me the rough mix. But to me, it's actually a little bit more than that. You see, when I go into a mix with someone, I want to listen to that rough mix and then I want to talk to them about it. Because you can find so much about what the client wants from you by talking about their rough, especially if they've produced it or done the rough mix themselves. Because I can ask them what they like about it, what they struggled with, what they don't like about it. And there have been quite a few times when, I don't know, let's say there's a guitar sound and it's really kind of muffled and sort of a bit washed out at the back of the mix. And I've listened to that on the rough and gone, oh, well, I could tidy that guitar up a bit. And then I have a conversation with the client and they're like, right, well, that guitar sound I really, really like. Spent a long time with that. That's exactly how I want it. Now, if I hadn't had that conversation, I'd probably go in and do everything that I thought was right to do for that guitar. And then we get to the revisions process and I'd be spending my time undoing that work because I hadn't taken the time to actually ask a client what they wanted. Red flag number 6, they don't ask for reference tracks. Now, for me, reference tracks are essential. They are such an important part of getting the sound that I want for my clients, but I know not every mixer asks for them. And again, that's just a massive warning sign for me because it just tells me that the mixer is planning to mix it how they want to mix it, how they think it should sound, when they're not using every tool available to get an idea of what you actually want from the mix. Red flag number 7, they don't do a signed contract. Now, this is a big one. I remember working with a mix engineer quite a long time ago, and everything was just done over text. We arranged the mix, we agreed on the price, I sent them a WeTransfer link, did a bank transfer for the money, the mix came back, it was all good. But now it seems mad to me that we never did a contract, because a contract does so much for both parties. It's a good way of defining exactly what the deal is. It should say whether or not you're including things like edits, comping, tuning, that sort of thing. It avoids you getting stung for extras like stems or alternate mixes. It also helps avoid any confusion because it should all be down there in black and white. What the mixer is doing for you, what they're not doing for you. Perhaps most important of all, the contract should state what's going on with the rights to the song. Now, like most mix engineers, I'd say I work as an engineer for hire. I work for a flat rate and I don't take any points or percentages on the master or the publishing or any rights of any kind. And all of my contracts say this. So if my client gets signed by a label and they want to get serious with it, they have a document signed by me that states that my involvement in the track was completely transactional, which to a lot of people is important and can be quite reassuring. Red flag number 8, they don't communicate promptly. Now, this might seem like a bit of a trivial one, but I promise you, if you're trying to exchange a back and forth with someone, let's say you're in the revisions process and you're trying to get something moving, if they're spending 3, 4, 5 days between every email getting back to you, it can get really frustrating. And the time, especially if you've got like a proper back and forth conversation going on, the time really adds up. You can lose focus. If you've got a deadline that's really, really important, And also, I think this just tells you something about the person who you're working with, because mixing is quite a technical job. It's creative as well, but you do need to be organized, especially on large sessions. You're juggling a large number of audio files. The sessions can get quite complex, file storage, file backup, that sort of thing. And I honestly think that one of the skills of a mix engineer, at the end of the day, the clue's in the name, we are engineers. This isn't a soft subject. We're actually doing quite technical work. And I think the way that I communicate with my clients is reflective of the way that I work, and it's reflective of the attitude that I have towards my work. So if you're dealing with someone and at first they reply in 2 hours, and then they don't reply to your next email for 3 days, and then they're back in 1 day, and then 5 days, it might be worth considering what that tells you about the person you're working with. Okay, red flag number 9, and this isn't essential by any stretch, but if your mixer just takes all the files exactly as they are, doesn't ask any questions, doesn't raise any queries about how they're delivered, or doesn't specify how they want them delivered in the first place, that's definitely a suggestion that they aren't necessarily using every avenue they can to try and get the most out of the material. Okay, so this is a little bit of a tricky one, but red flag number 10 is about how your mixer presents himself in the space that they work in. Now, the first thing I want to say is that you can definitely argue that the place where you work, the studio where someone does their work, isn't necessarily a critical part of how they get that sound. If I get a mix back and it sounds absolutely amazing, it doesn't really matter to me if they did that on a pair of AirPods or if they did it in like a £10 million studio facility, right? If it sounds good, it sounds good. But, and there are exceptions to this, but I would say that most mix engineers worth their salt are going to be working somewhere with at least a well-treated room and a half-decent set of monitors. So if you see your mixers working on a pair of KRKs in an untreated room with a pair of cheap headphones around their neck, particularly if they're charging you a lot of money, I would definitely question how they're working. And I appreciate this is going to be controversial. Maybe their mixes speak for themselves. But if you haven't worked with that person before, I don't know, I would be questioning things slightly. The flip side of this, I think, is that if you are employing a mix engineer at the bottom end of the scale and, maybe you're paying like £200 for a mix or something, but their photo shows them in front of some like enormous SSL console in a professional studio, I think it's probably reasonable to assume that they're not actually working in that space. I film these videos in my studio, I do most of my calls from this studio, and I think it's reassuring to let my clients know where I'm actually working. It would be very easy for me to just pay 200 quid for like 3-hour slot, go to a pro studio with amazing like Neve console or something like that, and just stand in front of it and take some photos. I wouldn't even have to do anything. And it wouldn't be difficult for me to suggest that that's where I work. But I don't believe in that. I believe in transparency. I spent a lot of money and a long time getting this room to sound how I want it to, and I'm really happy working in here. I know I'm not working on an SSL console, but it doesn't matter. I get really good results and I'm happy in this space. And I do think the space that I've made here is a big part of the sound that I'm able to achieve for my clients. And if you're looking to hire a new mix engineer for the first time, I do think it's worth considering where they're working and how that could affect the results that they're able to get for you. There you go, those are my 10 early warning signs if you're looking to hire a new mix engineer. That's it for this week, but please do like and subscribe for more tips, tricks, resources and downloads from me at Moonshift Audio. Till next time.